Hi, this is Ingrid London from TechCrunch, and I'm here with Dennis Crowley from Foursquare.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, thanks for taking some time to talk to me.
It's good to see you again.
Very good to see you too. The last time we met was in Barcelona, before you raised your very large round of funding.
Yep.
We talked quite a lot at that time about your transformation into being a search company, local search,
Yep.
as your big thing. And of course, part of that has to do with the extensive use of your API by a bunch of developers, something like 40,000, I think you told me at the time.
about 40,000 developers in the API.
That's right. And of course, the play you've got going with merchants and helping them connect with their consumers. It got me thinking, though, given that Foursquare is pretty much developed as a consumer service, and you're doing all these things, do you see yourself in Foursquare kind of longer term moving into more as an enterprise app rather than a consumer app? I mean, do you see that part kind of stopping and the other part is the growing part?
No, I mean, I can see some of the things that we're doing with the API breaking off and people building kind of enterprise tools with those, but you know, we're very much focused on building consumer apps. Actually, I think we're really good at building consumer apps. And you know, the thing that we've always wanted to do is build these apps that real people use, like every day, to help them figure out the best of what's going on nearby. And you know, I'd like to continue doing that. And I think that's one of the things that we're best at.
Do you think Foursquare has a future continuing as a consumer brand?
Oh, I hope so. Yeah, I think so. I hope so. I mean, that's what we're in it for, and that's what people use us for now. You know, like I can imagine that. You know, I can imagine that more folks might see our, you know, some of the tools that we build and some of the, you know, APIs that are available as being suitable for enterprise use. But I think that, you know, our focus will remain on the consumer.
Cool. I'm asking because this morning we had Chris Dixon on stage from Andreessen Horowitz, and he spent a lot of time talking about two different things, which I'll get to both of them. But one of them was he sort of talked about the I guess you'd call it the general fatigue, I think were his words, of social media and consumer, and how there's been a kind of change and a shift towards hardware startups. So what's your take on that? And do you think that, do you have a rebuttal for that?
No, I mean, it seems like it's like an investor's perspective, though.
Yeah.
It's not like consumers are sick of Twitter and sick of Facebook and sick of, you know, Instagram and Foursquare and everything else. Like, there's, you know, maybe they're not as willing to try every brand new social service that comes out that begs you to create you know, a layer of social connectivity. But you know, people are using this more than they've ever used in the past. I don't think that's I don't think it's slowing down at all.
So you think that what it might be is a message about what the new things that are coming to market.
It might be maturing, right? So it's like, okay, there are those 4 or 5 players that are out there, and these are the tools that you know, that consumers have decided that they really like and they want to continue using. So maybe that means like it's a lot harder for smaller consumer startups to kind of go and break through. You know, but like I pay attention to the hardware stuff as well. Like I'm really excited about that space, but I'm looking at it mostly as like, okay, well, how does this affect Foursquare, like strategically? But I don't see, you know, consumers racing out to buy every single new gadget on Kickstarter.
Okay, tell me what that means. How does it affect Foursquare strategically? How does it affect Foursquare strategically? What are you thinking about with hardware?
Well, we think about like what are the new forms of hardware that people are gonna, you know, use. Like now there are, you know, the billions of people with a smartphone in their pocket, and that is a lot different than the way the world was 5 years ago. And you know, there's a lot of talk about like, hey, is it too much work to take your phone out of your pocket and check it all the time? Or is it less disruptive if that screen is here or if that screen is here? And
what's the next thing Foursquare will develop for then?
Well, we want to play with all of these things. Like none of them are going to reach, you know, mass consumer adoption anytime soon, right? But we're interested in kind of playing in the space and experimenting with a lot of these devices and figuring out, all right, what are the ways that we can take all of the magic in our API and put that on these different screens that people are going to use. Like we're really good at doing that just on those phones that you carry or those screens that you carry in your pocket. And you know, we will be really good at doing it all the other screens. But you know, we got to play with those things a little bit.
Have you developed anything for smartwatches yet?
We haven't built anything yet, but we've been, you know, we've seen people do it with our API, and we've seen really interesting prototypes come out of that. And there's like a lot of speculation about what we could do with, you know, with other types of devices that are out there. And so it's interesting to see, you know, kind of see where that stuff could go. Do
you think it's something Foursquare would like to do itself, or would it be something that you leave to third parties via APIs?
We're not going to get in the hardware business. Like that's not our thing. Like we're good at building software that goes on screens, and we're good at building the plumbing that goes on behind behind the scenes to make that software appear on other screens. But we're not going to get into hardware.
You're not getting into hardware?
I have no plans to get into hardware.
Okay. Because
you've got this like
I know, I've got a bee in my bonnet about hardware.
I know. You think we're working on like the next Xbox or something? Like,
this is not the first time I've asked you about this.
The answer is still the same.
Okay. Something else that Chris mentioned that I wanted to ask you about, since you are in some ways the quintessential New York startup. He said a lot about he described the parallels between New York and San Francisco as startup cultures. He said, in fact, they're quite similar.
Yep.
One problem or setback being for New York that it doesn't have such a large ecosystem. So for mid-stage startups to go and get, for example, to staff up for international expansion or for sales and stuff, they have a harder time in a city like New York, whereas in San Francisco they could go, poach people from Google and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What's your response to that?
Yeah, I didn't get to see Chris's talk, but it's interesting to note that. Specifically, we pull people out of tech companies, other tech companies all the time. We have an office in New York, we have an office in San Francisco, and we see people that leave these other companies to join us all the time. I think the thing that Chris is referring to is that, in San Francisco, you might be able to reach into one specific company and pull that whole team over. And there's maybe 10 or 12 companies where you can pull from. And in New York, you've got a handful of big tech companies, but maybe the biggest one is probably Google. And we've pulled a lot of our engineers out of Google, specifically in New York, myself included.
Right.
And I see Chris's point that there's not 10 different instances of those in New York, and so that it's interesting. But at the same time, like, you've got all these people that have worked on Madison Avenue doing advertising. You've got a ton of smart engineers here. You've got a lot of great designers. You've got a lot of great product people. So there's still plenty of folks, but I can still see his point.
Okay. I think right now we're going to take a look at some of the tweets that are coming in.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Okay.
And speaking on stage and speaking with me back here. And I look forward to interviewing you again and seeing what the next thing that Foursquare will be doing.
Always happy to answer your hardware questions.
Oh yes, I look forward to asking you more about hardware. Yeah, that too. Thank you.